everlasting darkness, black holes slurping you up is what I think of when the incomprehensible concept of space is brought up. Today I want to bring up space, specifically the space race. A lot believe it ended in 1975, but in reality, it never ended and it never will. At the rate at which technology is growing and advancements in space are being made, it will be us who are exploring space and making the breakthroughs of tomorrow. I'd like to imagine it as Tomorrowland, if anyone's seen that movie. But if not done correctly or by the right people, it can end up in the wrong hands. The space race really took off when the USSR was the first to launch a satellite called Sputnik 1 into low elliptical orbit, 360 miles up into the air. They did this to beat the Americans to the first satellite launch in 1955. This obviously scared the Americans who were aware of what was happening and instantly put a large sum of money into NASA and other space agencies. And by 1965, 4.5% of federal funding was going to NASA, which is about $45 billion. Advancements that ignited the fuse of the space race happened around 1930 in Nazi Germany when they started to research suborbital ballistic missiles. And it was also around this time that liquid fuel engines were starting to become popular. Once Soviet Russia found out, they seized a rocket center in Germany and sent their best rocket engineers to see what they could salvage from German science. They brought all papers and built engines back to Russia to reverse engineer them. Since 1914, America had been working on solid fuel advancements, which weren't that great and were only capable of short range. And they weren't working too hard on liquid fuel engines until the late 40s. Around 1945, after the war's end, America took a large sum of V-2 liquid rockets from Germany and modified them to reach the outer edges of the atmosphere and got the first pictures of it ever. The economy just after World War II was phenomenal. It went up 50% from 1940 to 1950. War was boosting and pushing the economy as the development of missiles were having breakthroughs. And this kept people with jobs as NASA was contracting them. Now, you're probably wondering about the moon. Towards the middle of the war, according to Wikipedia, around 1961, James E. Webb requested a budget to get a man on the moon by 1970. Kennedy, after some convincing, accepted it. After the incredible feat of landing a man on the moon with the computing power of what less than each of us have in our pockets, we won the space race, and the end was approaching. The economy was soon also to take some hard hits after NASA lost a lot of funding. After the space race officially ended in the early 70s, the economy took hard hits. According to the balance, the unemployment rate reached nearly 10% in the late 70s and even into the 80s. At the same time, according to the U.S. federal budget, NASA had huge funding cuts. From nearly 5% of federal funding, they dropped all the way to 0.8%. And this slowed NASA's research and launch capabilities greatly, and the private industry was left to take over. Obviously, today's economy is doing incredibly well, but the only ones really pushing the edges of space are private industries like SpaceX and Virgin Galactic. Now, this is great for the economy, but they are limited greatly from federal regulations that NASA can get around. As mentioned before, NASA has a huge edge over private industries. The biggest is that they are already extremely well established and have launch sites, research facilities, and don't need to worry about making any kind of profit. What NASA, with their minuscule funding and 0.5% of the federal budget, can't afford to launch entire rockets. But since the private industry is doing so well lately, they're letting companies launch from NASA's launch sites like Cape Canaveral. NASA still does research though, not much with their 0.5% of funding, but they contract out other companies that specialize in certain parts and certain research, which helps boost the economy as putting back into it. My guess is that our government is not going to do much to fund NASA unless a space race 2 happens or another war that involves space occurs. But according to the Cooperation of Peaceful Use of Space Agreement in 1992, there's always something we can do. I'm behind. I'm sorry. In closing, I just want to reiterate how important it is for all of us. In 2022, SpaceX, probably the most well-known space organization, wants to fly cargo to Mars. Wow, I really messed up the timing. I'm sorry, guys.
You all good, bro?
I don't know I don't even know where I got behind. Wait, what? Didn't they just say closing?
Uh-huh.
Am I okay?
You're
No.
okay, Alek.